Have you ever wondered if your first sleep tonight might not be just sleep, but a rehearsal for something else, something colder, quieter, and far too permanent? Before we drift into this ancient darkness together, take a slow breath. And if you have not yet, give this video a like, tell me where you are listening from, and subscribe to the channel. It means more than you think. Now close your eyes, but not too tight. Because in the past, closing your eyes too long could mean never opening them again. You see, before modern electricity, before the comfort of night lamps and smartphones glowing beside your bed, humans lived in fear of what they called the first sleep. In medieval Europe, people did not sleep through the night the way we do. Their sleep came in two halves. The first sleep began when the sun disappeared and the fires dimmed. It lasted for a few hours, a deep, strange state where dreams were said to mingle with spirits. And then, they woke. The watching hour, as they called it. For 1 or 2 hours, entire families sat in silence, praying, whispering, or sometimes staring into the dark corners of the house. Some wrote letters, some made love, others spoke softly to ghosts of those they had lost, believing the boundary between worlds was thinner then, and when the time came, they laid down again for the second sleep. But the terrifying part was not the waking. It was the fear of not waking between them. You see, the first sleep was believed to be the most dangerous, the moment when the soul wandered furthest. If your soul strayed too far and could not find its way back, well, your body would wake cold and stiff, dead. That is why families kept candles burning all night, or whispered protective prayers before lying down. Mothers tied red threads around their children's wrists to help the soul find home. Some even slept holding each other's hands, a desperate human way of saying, "If you go, take me too." But imagine it now, you, lying in a wooden house, darkness thick as oil, the crackle of fire dying down, and the silence pressing against your chest. You do not know if the sound outside is the wind, or someone gently trying the latch. And then you wonder if sleep itself might be the intruder. The church warned people that demons loved sleeping souls, easy prey, soft and defenseless. That is why they said, never fall asleep angry, or you will wake in hell. The irony, of course, is that sleep was the only escape they had from that endless, grim existence. But here's a question. What if they were right? What if every night a tiny part of you dies, and the person who wakes up is almost but not quite the same? The body remembers, but the dream stays behind. It is a haunting thought, is not it? Somewhere between heartbeat and silence, between exhale and nothing, we cross that line every night willingly. So, when you lie down tonight, think of those who feared the first sleep. And maybe, just maybe, leave a light on for the part of you that might not find its way back. They say our modern fears were born from ancient nights, from the trembling breath of those who first dared to close their eyes inside the earth itself. Imagine it, you, tens of thousands of years ago, crawling into a cold cave after sunset. The air smells of smoke and wet stone. You can hear the river somewhere outside, whispering against rocks like a ghost that forgot your name. The fire flickers low, painting trembling shadows on the walls, and for a moment they move in ways that do not quite match the flames. You are not alone. Your tribe believes that when you sleep, your spirit leaves through your mouth. So before anyone lies down, they smear ash around their lips, a protection charm, meant to confuse evil spirits that might try to slip inside while your own spirit wanders out. Mothers hum low, throaty songs to lull their children, not just to soothe them, but to drown out the sounds that creep through the cave's throat. Because outside the night is alive, predators pacing, the wind howling like something half-human. There is no door, no walls of safety, only darkness, bone, and fear. But humans are clever creatures. They sleep together in clusters, forming circles where the strongest lie at the edges, human barriers against what waits beyond. They think that if the gods see them close enough, breathing in rhythm, they will mistake them for one great creature, too large to eat. You turn toward the warmth of another body, listen to the slow beat of a heart beside you, and you realize something eternal, that sleep was never truly safe, yet we seek it anyway. And maybe that is why our brains still twitch before falling asleep, that tiny jolt, like you are falling. Science calls it a hypnic jerk. But maybe, just maybe, it is the echo of a prehistoric terror, your body testing whether you have really died, or just drifted too far into dream. The shaman of your tribe sleeps last. He draws strange spirals on the cave floor with animal blood, believing they are roads for the soul, pathways to guide you back before dawn. He listens to your breathing, waiting for the first sigh that means you have crossed over. And when you dream of the hunt, of fire, of the ancestors, he swears he can hear them too. Sometimes he claims to see them walking among you, bending down to whisper into your ear. That is why when someone wakes screaming, the tribe does not comfort them. They listen. They listen to the dream as if it were a message. Because in this world, dreams are not imagination. They are instructions. They tell you when to move camps, when to hunt, who will die next winter. And so every night is both sleep and seance. Every cave, a temple. Every dream, a prophecy. You might think we have outgrown that. But tell me honestly, when your power goes out, when your home goes silent, when the walls feel thinner than usual, do you still check the dark corners before lying down? Do you leave a small light, not for convenience but for something older inside you that still remembers the cave? You may laugh at the superstition of smearing ash on your lips, but you probably still pull your blanket up to your chin, do not you? Some rituals never die. They just learn to hide in modern sheets. And as you drift tonight, somewhere between Netflix and nothingness, maybe you will dream of a cave damp breathing, alive, and a flicker of fire that refuses to go out. And if you do not wake too quickly. The walls might still be listening. Picture this, marble corridors glimmering in torchlight, the scent of resin and honey thick in the air, and somewhere, beneath linen wrappings and painted eyes, a body waits for dawn. The ancient Egyptians believed that death was only a deeper form of sleep, that the soul wandered through dreams just as the living did each night. So to understand death, some tried to imitate it. There were priests who slept beside the embalmed, whispering prayers through the night to catch fragments of the deceased's dreams. They called it incubation of the dead. You might call it madness, or maybe devotion, because they believed if they shared sleep with the departed they could borrow their wisdom, or glimpse the roads that the soul must travel beyond the veil. Imagine lying there, the air cool and heavy, the faint crackle of oil lamps echoing off stone. You roll onto your side, and the wrappings beside you shift slightly, not because the corpse moves, of course, but because your mind decides to make it so. A trick of the torchlight, a twitch of fear, and suddenly you are wide awake. But you do not dare open your eyes. Some tomb priests claimed that when they slept beside mummies, they felt a pulse beneath the bandages, as though the dead were dreaming too. Others said they awoke with sand in their mouths, as if the desert itself had tried to claim them. The Greeks borrowed the ritual centuries later, but with less dust and more drama. In temples of Asclepios, the god of healing, people slept among the dead or dying to receive dream prescriptions. They believed that the god would visit in sleep, sometimes disguised as a serpent, to whisper cures or warnings. And yes, they often placed the dying in the same chamber, because the boundary between healing and haunting was considered a matter of perspective. You might think that is revolting, but not so different from how we keep the ashes of loved ones on mantles, whispering to them on sleepless nights. Maybe we still crave that impossible connection, to lie close enough to hear the silence of those who left first. There is something profoundly human about it, the refusal to let death have the last word. Science would later call it thanatos association, the comfort of proximity to death. But no explanation makes the image less haunting. Hundreds of sleepers stretched out on stone floors, the living and the lifeless chasing each other through dreams. Some said the dead spoke in riddles. Others claimed they merely stared, wordless and patient, waiting for you to fall asleep so they could borrow your warmth for a while. The question is, if you shared a bed with death, would you dream its dreams or would it dream yours? Would you wake up with answers? Or not wake up at all? Maybe that is why the ancients left the lamps burning until dawn, not out of fear of ghosts, but because deep down they knew the dead deserved a little light too. Some nights were never meant for rest. In the heart of ancient Thebes, beneath ceilings painted with stars, priests prepared the living for death and the dead for dreams. The ritual was called the Night of Rebirth, and only the highest of the pharaohs dared to attempt it. It began at dusk. The ruler would enter the tomb built for him long before his death, accompanied by the hum of incense and the slow beat of sistrums. The air was thick with myrrh, lotus, and fear. As the last sunlight vanished from the desert, he lay down inside his open sarcophagus, not as a corpse, but as a traveler rehearsing eternity. The lid remained slightly ajar, because this was not yet a burial. Only a performance of it. Imagine the silence, your body heavy with ceremonial oils, your chest rising and falling against stone colder than memory. The priests circled you, whispering spells from the Book of the Dead, instructions for the soul in case it wandered too far before dawn. You were told to focus on your breath, to imagine it turning into a golden bird. If you succeeded, your soul would take flight into the night sky to meet Ra, the sun god, and return at morning's first light. If you failed, your body might breathe, but your spirit would not come back. It was the most sacred kind of sleepwalking. No tossing, no turning, only stillness. Those who survived the ritual claimed to awaken changed, eyes glowing faintly from candlelight, voices slower, as if half of them had stayed in the realm beyond. Some went mad. Others became prophets. The line between holiness and insanity was as thin as a papyrus reed. One account speaks of a pharaoh who dreamed of drowning in black water, only to be found days later dead in his bed, lungs full of fluid. Coincidence? Or did the gods finish what the dream began? Modern scholars say it was a primitive form of sensory deprivation, a way to induce hallucination, rebirth through suffocation. But tell me, when you lie in your own bed tonight, still and quiet, does not part of you also practice for that final sleep, the linen sheets that wrap you, the low hum of the night? They are softer echoes of the shroud and tomb. Maybe that is the hidden genius of the ancients. They turned their greatest fear into ritual, their death into rehearsal, and their sleep into a promise. So next time you wake before dawn, heart racing, unsure if you were dreaming or falling, remember the pharaoh who once lay awake inside his coffin, waiting for the sun to rise again, just to prove he was still alive. There was a time when you did not go to a doctor for your illness. You went to sleep. Not at home, but in a temple, surrounded by stone pillars carved with serpents and gods that watched from every direction. This was ancient Greece, the birthplace of dream healing, where sleep itself was a sacred prescription. The temple of Asclepios, the god of medicine, welcomed the sick, the desperate, and the lost. They came from faraway lands, limping, bleeding, trembling, clutching tiny figurines of the god, begging for a dream that could save them. Before they were allowed to lie down, the priests washed their feet with wine and water, then made them offer honey cakes to the serpents that slithered freely across the marble floors. The Greeks did not fear the snakes. They saw them as divine messengers, tongues tasting the boundary between worlds. When night came, hundreds of hopeful souls lay down together in the abaton, the forbidden chamber. The torches dimmed. The air thickened with oil and incense. You could hear the faint hissing of scales against stone, the sound of someone weeping quietly beside you, and beneath it all the heartbeat of the earth. That is when the dreams began. Some claimed to see Asclepios himself, glowing with light, touching their wounds and whispering cures. Others saw monstrous visions, serpents crawling into their mouths, or gods tearing open their chests to remove sickness with bare hands. But everyone agreed when dawn came, they were not the same. The priests would interpret the dreams. The god entered you, they would say, and left behind the cure. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes the patient simply did not wake, but death was also considered healing, the ultimate release from pain. The Romans later borrowed the ritual, turning it into a luxury for the rich. They built marble sleeping chambers with silk cushions and called them oracular beds. Imagine it, sleeping on a slab of stone, hoping a god will show up in your dreams to explain your future. Today we call that therapy, only more expensive. But perhaps there is wisdom in it. After all, even now we search our dreams for meaning, hoping that the strange film playing behind our eyes might hold a message. Maybe that is why you sometimes wake up with your heart pounding, after a dream you can't remember. Maybe you did meet something. Something that came to look at you, to study the way you sleep. The ancients would tell you, do not be afraid of it. Listen, the dream might not be yours alone. The Romans did not just sleep. They engineered sleep, bottled it, flavored it, and sold it to anyone who could afford a night without nightmares. Picture a dimly lit atrium in ancient Rome. The marble floors slick with spilled wine and perfume, the hum of conversation fading as twilight settles. Somewhere in the back a servant mixes a drink, wine thick as blood blended with crushed poppy seeds, myrrh, and a drop of something the apothecaries refused to name aloud. They called it somnus vinum, the wine of sleep. It was both medicine and poison, depending on the dose and the darkness of your thoughts. Wealthy senators drank it before bed to quiet their guilt. Gladiators drank it to silence pain, and lovers drank it together to escape the world, promising to meet again in dreams. The Romans worshipped Somnus, the god of sleep, and his twin brother Mors, the god of death, one eyelid apart, they said. Their poets wrote of sleep as the rehearsal of the grave, but the people did not mind. They chased it anyway, the way we chase our sleeping pills and blue light filters. Some even kept miniature idols of Somnus under their pillows, bronze figures with closed eyes and wings sprouting from their temples. The superstition was simple. If the god rested near your head, your dreams would be soft, not screaming. But soft dreams came at a price. The same poppy sap that lulled you could steal entire nights, erasing memory like a tide washing over footprints. Too much of the elixir, and you would wake up with a dry mouth, a pounding head, and a sense that someone had spoken to you while you slept, but you could not remember what. Doctors called it healing. Philosophers called it divine amnesia. The soldiers called it mercy. In the darker corners of the city, people began using sleep like currency. Slaves were fed the elixir to keep them docile, to make the nights pass faster. The wealthy used it for pleasure, hosting dream feasts where guests would drink themselves into oblivion and describe their visions in the morning, as if trading postcards from another world. Sound familiar? We still do it, only now it is with melatonin and glowing screens. We bargain with exhaustion, we buy silence by the ounce. 2,000 years later, nothing has changed, only the recipe. The Romans believed that when you woke after drinking somnus vinum, your soul came back cleaner, lighter, as if scrubbed by forgetfulness. But some claimed the opposite, that each time you surrendered to it, a small part of you stayed behind, trapped in that dark syrupy sleep. If that is true, then maybe not everyone who woke up was still entirely themselves. So next time you pour a glass to unwind, ask yourself, are you soothing your mind or training it to disappear just a little faster each night? There was a time when the night itself was the enemy. Before street lamps, before clocks, before the luxury of sleeping safely behind glass and locks, medieval Europe belonged to the dark. And the dark, everyone knew, had its own appetite. The villagers called it the night watch, but it was not a job. It was survival. Imagine a small cottage on the edge of the forest, a family huddled together in a single bed stuffed with straw. The fire is dying, the air smells of smoke and damp wool, and beyond the thin wooden wall wolves and worse things prowl. No one truly sleeps through the night. They take turns. 2 hours on, 2 hours off. The first sleep ends near midnight, and then, for one strange, floating hour, the entire village wakes at once. Candles flicker behind windows. People murmur prayers, stoke fires, whisper gossip. It is a time both eerily alive and half dead. They call it the watching hour, when the soul returns to check that the body still breathes. But it is also when the world feels thinner, and they say things slip through. You would think they exaggerated, but consider this. Most accounts of demon visitations, of succubi and nightmares, come from that hour. The watchers reported scratching on doors, whispers through keyholes, the slow drag of something heavy across rooftops. Was it rats or something waiting for someone to fall back asleep to protect themselves? Families drew chalk circles on the floor filled with salt and ash. Others burned herbs or sang psalms to keep the dead asleep. But here's the dark humor of it all. The church told people that the devil was most active when they were least awake. The half-dreaming are half-damned, one monk wrote. So villagers tried not to dream. They sat upright, eyes half open, nodding in and out of shallow rest, terrified of the images that might appear if they truly surrendered. Some even believed that yawning too wide might let something enter. The rich had guards and heavy doors. The poor had faith and each other. In cities, watchmen patrolled the streets with bells shouting, "All's well," even when it was not. Sometimes they would find sleepers who'd wandered outside, barefoot and dazed, mumbled confessions spilling from their mouths. "The dead are calling," they would say. Those were taken to church basements, forced awake with vinegar, chained until sunrise. Better a sinner than a sleepwalker. What strikes me most is how little has changed. We still fear the night, we just disguise it with electric light and playlists. We scroll until our eyes sting, we fight the silence until we collapse. Maybe the night watch never ended. We just made it wireless. So when you wake up at 3 a.m. tonight, heart pounding for no reason, do not panic. Maybe it is not insomnia. Maybe it is just your ancient instincts taking their turn on watch, because something out there still remembers when humans slept too deeply. If comfort is modern, then pain is ancient, and in India they learned to sleep on it. The ascetics known as sadhus believed that true rest came not from pleasure, but from conquering the body itself. So they built their beds from nails, sharp iron spikes set into wooden boards, and laid upon them every night as if daring their own flesh to flinch. Picture it, a man with ash smeared across his skin, hair matted with dust, lying on a bed of steel beneath an open sky. Around him the jungle hums, insects, jackals, wind. He does not move, not because he can't, but because movement would mean surrender. To him, each point pressing into his back is a reminder, you are not this body. The pain is only noise, and if you ignore it long enough, the universe starts whispering through it. Western travelers in the 18th century mocked them, calling them lunatics, fakirs, masochists. But science later discovered something unsettling. After a few minutes, the nails do not pierce the skin. The pressure spreads evenly. The body adapts. The pain turns into warmth. The heart slows. The brain releases endorphins, the same chemicals that come in moments of deep sleep. In other words, suffering and serenity share a border. The sadhus were not torturing themselves. They were crossing that border deliberately, teaching the body to dream while awake. Some claimed visions came to them, gods of fire, serpents of smoke, oceans of light. Others simply drifted into stillness, so absolute it resembled death. Villagers would leave offerings near them, fruit, coins, questions, believing that a man who could sleep on nails might know how to bend reality. And in a way, he did. Pain became his lullaby, hunger his hymn. When storms rolled in, he stayed unmoving, rain soaking through his skin, flies gathering on his lips. But inside he was miles away, lost in a sleep without softness, a dream without comfort. Psychologists today might call it transcendental focus. Neuroscientists would talk about altered brainwaves. Yet none of that explains why, when you stand near someone like that, the air feels heavier. It is the weight of someone who has left his body behind, even as it still breathes. You might think this has nothing to do with you, lying on your memory foam mattress, your spine perfectly aligned, your phone glowing 2 inches from your face. But when life cuts deep, heartbreak, loss, regret, do not you also lie awake, feeling the sharp points pressing into your mind? Maybe that is your bed of nails. Maybe you are practicing the same ritual, only privately. The difference is, the sadhu accepts the pain, lets it pierce him until it becomes peace. You, on the other hand, roll over and check the time. Maybe true rest has never been about escaping discomfort. Maybe it is about surviving it long enough to outdream it. Every culture has a moment in the night when things go wrong, when shadows move on their own, when the air thickens, when you wake and can't tell if you are alone. For centuries, that moment had a name, the witching hour. Somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning, when even the birds stopped singing, people believed the veil between worlds wore thin. Not gone, just threadbare enough for something to slip through. Picture it, a 14th century farmhouse in rural England, a single candle burning low, the rest of the world black and infinite. You stir in your bed of hay, your body heavy but your mind awake. Outside, a dog whines once and goes silent. You feel a weight on your chest, not pain exactly, just pressure, like someone sitting there watching. You try to move, but your limbs belong to stone. Your breath grows shallow, and in that suspended instant, you remember the sermons. Demons ride the sleepers, the priest had warned. They feed on breath and fear. The people called it nightmare, a word that once meant not a dream, but a creature, a mare that rode the living into half-death. To ward it off, villagers sprinkled salt on windowsills, drew crosses on their pillows, or hung iron keys above their beds, because even evil, they said, respected good craftsmanship. But it was not all fear. Some claimed that waking at this hour meant you had been chosen, that your soul was strong enough to witness what others could not. Monks used the time to pray. Alchemists took notes by candlelight, waiting for visions. And women accused of witchcraft were said to dance with shadows just before dawn, their dreams echoing into the real world. Modern science calls it REM intrusion, your mind waking before your body, trapped in paralysis while the dream world still lingers. But tell that to someone who has felt fingers on their throat. Tell it to the miner who woke gasping in a tunnel and swore he saw a face in the dark whispering his name. We explain it away because we have to, otherwise we would never sleep again. Yet deep down, we keep the rituals. We turn on hallway lights, we leave TVs humming, we check our phones at 3 a.m. like digital rosaries. Maybe that is not insomnia. Maybe that is instinct, the same old fear dressed in Wi-Fi. And here's a cruel little joke history plays. The church said 3 a.m. was the inverse of Christ's death hour, the devil's mockery of redemption. But what if it is simply when the body is weakest, the mind most open, and the universe most curious? So if you wake tonight and the room feels wrong, do not panic. Do not fight. Just breathe slowly. The shadow at the edge of your vision might not mean harm. It might just be something ancient, checking to see if you still remember how to fear the dark. In the 14th century, when death moved faster than prayer, people learned to fear even the act of closing their eyes. The Black Death came like a tide, first a cough, then a fever, then silence. Towns vanished. Bells rang so often that no one heard them anymore. And in the middle of that terror, something strange began to happen. People started to sleep together. Not in passion, but in desperation. Imagine a house where half the family is gone, the other half shivering under rough blankets. Outside, the streets reek of smoke and rot. You can hear the carts creaking by, the dead wagons they call them. Inside, the survivors gather shoulder to shoulder, whispering psalms, clutching one another, begging the night to pass without another body turning cold. They called it the shelter sleep. It was not deep or peaceful or safe. It was the kind of sleep you take when the world feels like it is ending, and you still want to feel human. Some people slept in churches, on the stone floors between coffins, believing that the holy dead could absorb the sickness through dreams. Others slept under vinegar-soaked cloths or next to burning herbs, hoping to breathe purity instead of plague. The rich had their own rituals. They sealed themselves in rooms thick with incense, sleeping in masks shaped like birds, the long beaks stuffed with lavender and rose petals. They said the scent fooled death, that if you smelled alive, you would stay that way. It rarely worked. But humans will do anything to believe in comfort. Doctors, if you could call them that, told people to sleep as deeply as possible, to outdream the disease. They said the plague could not enter a body that was resting. And so many went to bed and never woke up again, faces calm, as if their last breath had been relief. The monks who buried them began to whisper of a different infection, not of the body, but of the mind. They said that despair spread faster than any rat, that once you believed you would die in your sleep, your body followed suit. Fear itself became the contagion. One chronicle speaks of a village where no one dared close their eyes, where people sang all night to stay awake. After 3 days, they began to hallucinate, shadows crawling, voices calling their names. By dawn, they slept anyway, all at once, as if the plague had simply waited for permission. Centuries later, historians would call it collective trauma. But it feels simpler than that. They were just tired. Tired of watching death. Tired of pretending light could keep it out. Maybe that is why, even now, when the world feels sick and uncertain, we crawl closer to one another at night, not for warmth but for proof. Proof that someone else is still breathing beside us. Proof that we have not yet been claimed by the same quiet that took them. In the stone silence of medieval monasteries, sleep was not mercy, it was a test. The monks of Cluny, Chartres, and Canterbury all believed that too much sleep opened the gates of hell. To close your eyes too long was to invite temptation, because idleness, they said, was the devil's lullaby. Their days began in darkness, and so did their nights. At the stroke of midnight, bells shattered the stillness, calling every brother from his thin straw mattress to the chapel for matins, the first prayers of the new day. Barefoot, half awake, they filed into the freezing choir stalls, chanting Latin verses while the air turned their breath to mist. Then, after an hour of devotion, they returned to their cells for another brief sleep, 3, maybe 4 hours before the next bell. They called this broken rhythm holy rest. The body hated it. The soul was supposed to love it. The monks trained themselves to fall asleep sitting upright, hands folded across their chests, so that they would be ready for prayer even in dreams. Some bound their hair to the wall with a cord to keep their heads from drooping. Others slept on planks of oak or on the bare floor, or with a single thin blanket to discipline the flesh. There are records of monks who claimed to hear voices in the night, not divine ones but mocking whispers. You could sleep forever, they said. You have earned it. They called it the tempter's lullaby. And sometimes, the brothers believed it. There were incidents of monks found dead in their cells, bodies kneeling as if still in prayer, faces peaceful, lips blue. The abbot said they had slept into grace. The physicians, if they were brave enough to speak, called it exhaustion. It is strange. The same men who renounced comfort spent their nights fighting for it, hearts pounding in rhythm with the bells, minds drifting into half-sleep that felt more like drowning. They sought purity through deprivation, believing the soul shone brighter the closer it stood to collapse. But there is a kind of madness in that. Modern science would call it hypnagogic hallucination. The vivid visions that come when the body begs for rest and the brain starts to dream while still awake. To the monks, it was revelation. Angels, demons, voices of God, all born from sleep they were too frightened to trust. And maybe they were right to fear it. In the dark, without candles, without warmth, the mind begins to whisper things it should not. Yet somehow they endured. They sang. They prayed. They slept just enough to wake again. Perhaps that is the cruel miracle of faith. It keeps you alive when you have forgotten how to rest. So the next time you lie awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, remember those monks who believed every blink was a negotiation with sin. And maybe for them, heaven was not a place of light, but finally, mercifully, a place where no one had to wake up. If you were rich enough in 17th century France, you did not wait to die to try your coffin on for size. It was fashionable, macabre yes, but fashionable, for nobles to order ornate caskets lined with velvet, then sleep in them every night as a spiritual exercise. They called it le sommeil du tombeau, the sleep of the tomb. Imagine a candlelit chamber in Paris, the air heavy with rose oil and decay. A countess lowers herself into a polished oak box, carved with cherubs and skulls, murmuring a prayer that sounds suspiciously like a sigh. A servant closes the lid halfway, leaving a thin crack of air. The sound of the latch clicking is almost tender, like the final note of a lullaby. Why do this? Because death, they said, was easiest to face if you practiced it nightly. Priests blessed the custom. Poets romanticized it. To sleep in your coffin was to remind yourself that time was a thief, and vanity its accomplice. It was also, ironically, an excellent conversation piece. Guests would visit salons where their hosts emerged from coffins at dusk, powdered and perfumed, declaring themselves reborn. You laugh, but our generation posts the same sentiment online every morning. New day, new me. Some things never change. We just swapped candlelight for ring lights. But not everyone did it for philosophy. Some nobles swore that sleeping in a coffin improved their complexion, that the stillness preserved youth. One duchess even filled hers with fresh herbs and cooled marble slabs, claiming the grave chill tightened her skin. Others did it to atone for sins they could not confess. The coffin became a confessional, its silence the only priest they trusted. And then there were those who went too far. One count ordered his servants to nail the lid shut for exactly 1 hour each night. To humble the soul, he said. They found him one morning still inside, smiling faintly, the air candle thick and gone. The papers called it poetic justice. His widow called it peace. There is something hauntingly human in it, this obsession with controlling the uncontrollable. We build rituals around death not because we understand it, but because pretending to rehearse makes it feel less final. Today we stage the same theater in subtler ways: cold plunge baths, sensory deprivation tanks, weighted blankets that simulate burial. All chasing the same illusion, to feel safe inside surrender. So when you pull your comforter over your chest tonight, listen to the hush it makes. That faint pressure might be more familiar than you think. Somewhere a duchess would nod approvingly. The Victorians had a complicated relationship with rest. They worshipped productivity by day and chased oblivion by night, terrified of what they called dream sickness. In London's gaslit bedrooms, where fog crept under the doors and the city never truly slept, scientists and spiritualists alike began dissecting the mystery of unconsciousness. Was dreaming a gateway to heaven or to madness? Doctors prescribed everything from ether to chloroform, promising dreamless sleep as if it were a luxury brand. Forget yourself, the advertisements whispered, and wake renewed. But forgetting came at a price. Picture a patient in a lace-trimmed nightgown, lying perfectly still while a nurse drips anesthesia onto a cloth pressed over her mouth. The eyes flutter once, twice, then roll back. The room goes still. What happens in those blank hours? The Victorians did not know. They only knew that when people slept without dreams, they often woke. Different. Not worse, exactly, just emptied. A famous doctor named Sir Henry Barlow once wrote, Those who no longer dream cease to fear death, for they practice it nightly. His paper was banned for spiritual indecency. Yet his clinic grew famous for its clientele. Poets, widows, soldiers, all desperate to escape the burden of imagination. There were side effects. Some patients woke screaming, unable to remember why. Others stopped sleeping entirely, too frightened of the blankness that awaited them. The newspapers called it the black nap. Rumors spread that dreamless sleep erased more than fatigue, that it stole memories, emotions, even faith. And still, the upper class lined up for it, chasing purity through chemical silence. Meanwhile, the poor had no such luxuries. Factory workers collapsed on cots beside their machines, slipping into restless dreams of fire and smoke. Their dreams terrified them too, but at least they were alive in them. Spiritualists, ever opportunistic, claimed they could sell dreams back to those who'd lost them. For a fee, they would hold seances where the dreamless could borrow visions from the dead. Some swore it worked, others fainted from the ether fumes. Science and superstition blurred, until no one could tell which side the nightmares belonged to. It is strange, is not it? 2 centuries later we still chase the same promise. We medicate our thoughts, blue light our brains, and call it progress. Yet the moment our heads hit the pillow, something ancient stirs the part of us that knows forgetting is never free. So if you wake tomorrow with a faint ache behind your eyes, and can't recall what you dreamed, maybe that is not emptiness. Maybe that is the echo of a deal your ancestors once made, peace, at the cost of imagination. There is a special kind of horror in realizing you can sin while unconscious. In the late 19th century, courts across Europe and America faced a new kind of criminal, the sleepwalker. They were not monsters, at least not while awake. They were bakers, students, soldiers, wives, who swore they would gone to bed like anyone else, only to wake beside blood, broken glass, or the bodies of those they loved. The newspapers called them midnight automatons. Doctors called it noctambulism. The public called it witchcraft. Picture Paris, 1887. A man named Jules is found standing in the middle of the street at dawn, barefoot, shirtless, covered in flour and candle wax, holding a knife he does not remember taking. He insists he was baking. His wife is dead upstairs, throat open like a confession. "I was dreaming," he sobs. "I thought I was cutting bread." The jury acquits him. How do you punish someone who was not truly there? Cases like this haunted the era. Psychologists dissected the phenomenon, describing it as a split between the waking body and the sleeping soul. The Victorians adored that phrase. It gave science a touch of poetry, and guilt a way out. But others whispered darker explanations, that during sleep, the devil found empty rooms to rent. Even scientists struggled to stay rational. One London neurologist kept a loaded pistol on his nightstand, just in case he rose to harm his own patients. Sleep became suspect, every nap a potential confession. Families began locking bedroom doors from the outside, mothers tying bells to their children's wrists. In Vienna, a physician wrote that sleepwalking was the brain's rebellion against morality, as if conscience itself needed a rest. But the more we studied it, the stranger it got. The sleepwalkers did not wander aimlessly. They reenacted fragments of their waking lives, twisted into grotesque theater. Soldiers marched. Clerks counted invisible coins. Widows whispered their husbands' names to the walls. And always, always, they woke with no memory. Some awoke mid-crime and screamed themselves sane. Others never woke at all. Modern science blames stress, trauma, or genetics. But it does not explain the testimonies of witnesses who swore they saw the sleepwalker's eyes open, wide, bright, aware. What if for a few fleeting seconds the dream truly does spill over? If part of you rises while the rest remains behind, which version is more real? The one that sleeps or the one that sins? We still laugh about sleepwalking, treat it like a harmless quirk. But maybe that is just how we cope with the knowledge that the mind has doors we can't lock. So tonight, when you shuffle to the kitchen for a midnight snack, just make sure the knife drawer stays closed. And if you ever wake up standing at your window, your hand pressed to the glass, watching something move in the yard below, maybe go back to bed before it notices you are awake. In old Japan, they believed that the soul could be trapped in objects, especially those that touched the body in moments of vulnerability. None were more intimate than the makora, the pillow. It cradled your breath, absorbed your dreams, and if you died in your sleep, it kept a piece of you. Over time, those fragments became restless. The people called them makoragashi, the pillow turners. Little spirits that crept into bedrooms at night, flipping pillows to startle sleepers or pressing down gently on their faces, testing if they were still alive. The legends say they were children who died young, lonely souls seeking warmth. Others claimed they were demons, jealous of the living's ability to dream. You can imagine the scene: a paper screen room, moonlight leaking through the cracks, a man sleeping soundly on a tatami mat. Somewhere between his inhale and exhale, the pillow shifts. Just a little. His eyes flutter open, but nothing moves. The silence hums. And yet he swears someone is sitting just behind him, small, patient, breathing in sync. To ward off the makoragashi, people began placing tokens beneath their pillows: a lock of hair from a loved one, a scrap of red cloth, a charm drawn with ink and salt. The idea was simple: give the ghost company so it would not need yours. But superstition, like sleep, evolves. During the Edo period, pillows became repositories of secrets. Lovers tied silk cords around theirs and whispered names into the fabric, believing the dreams would reach whoever they longed for. When jealousy turned to grief, the same pillows were buried or burned, releasing whatever lingered inside. Even samurai followed their own strange code of sleep. They never rested with their heads facing north, the direction of funeral processions. To do so invited death to mistake them for its next task. What fascinates me is how delicate their fear was: quiet, ceremonial, polite. The West feared demons. Japan feared memory. They did not want to fight the spirits. They wanted not to offend them. There is a tenderness in that, do not you think? A belief that even the dead deserve courtesy. Modern Japan still echoes the old custom. Some families keep pillows of deceased relatives untouched, covered in fresh cloth each year as if waiting for them to return. And maybe, in a way, they do. Because if you have ever woken from a dream of someone long gone, tears on your cheeks and the pillow still warm, tell me honestly, does not it feel like they were just here? Maybe the makoragashi never left. Maybe they just learned to be gentler, turning pillows not to frighten us, but to remind us we are still capable of missing someone in our sleep. Far in the northern lands, where the sun abandons the sky for months at a time, sleep was not a nightly ritual, it was a season. The Old Norse called it vetrarsvefen, the winter sleep. It was not exactly hibernation, not exactly living either, more like an agreement with the cold: we will stay still, and you will let us survive. Imagine a wooden hall buried under snow, its roof creaking under frost. The hearth burns low, just enough to keep death polite. Families wrap themselves in furs, lie shoulder to shoulder, and drift into a half-dream that lasts for weeks. The livestock doze in stalls nearby. Even the dogs barely twitch. Outside, the world holds its breath. The sagas say that while their bodies rested, their spirits wandered through frozen fjords into the halls of gods. Children would wake with tales of distant battles, as if they would traveled beyond the mountains in their dreams. Valhalla called, they would whisper. But I told it not yet. Modern historians insist it was just survival. Starvation demanded stillness, the human body conserving energy through long sleep cycles. But there is something poetic in the idea that they saw their endurance as a spiritual act, a pact with winter itself. Villagers lit candles every few days to mark time, not to count hours, but to remind themselves that light still existed somewhere. When someone died during the winter sleep, they said it was not death, it was the deeper rest. The body simply refused to wake when the snow melted. Families would keep the dead in bed until spring, sharing their blankets as if warmth could coax them back. And sometimes they swore it worked. One tale speaks of a hunter who froze solid in December and began breathing again in March. He claimed he would dreamt of a vast hall filled with fire and laughter, the feasting place of warriors, but had been told to return. There is still hunger in your village, the dream god said. Science would call it hypothermia and luck. The Norse called it mercy. They treated sleep like a small death and death like a long sleep, both ruled by the same quiet gods. And maybe that is why the old Nordic prayers never begged for life, only for a gentle awakening. Even now, in remote villages above the Arctic Circle, people talk about winter hearts, that heavy stillness that settles over the soul when the sun disappears. Doctors call it seasonal depression. The locals call it the old dream returning. Perhaps that is why even today we crave hibernation when the world grows cold, thick blankets, dark rooms, endless cups of something warm. Maybe we are not tired. Maybe we are remembering. The blood of those who once slept through winter still whispers inside us, close your eyes until the light returns. No one learns the value of sleep faster than a soldier. On the battlefield, sleep is not rest, it is strategy, defiance, and sometimes the last mercy left. Across centuries, men and women have closed their eyes in trenches, on ships, in jungles, in deserts, trying to steal seconds of peace between explosions. The ancient Romans called it sleeping on the edge of the shield, a phrase that meant you were alive, but barely. In Napoleonic wars, soldiers learned to doze while marching, heads bobbing like pendulums, their minds drifting into fragments of home. A general once wrote, "We march through dreams." But the nightmares did not wait for night. Picture the mud of Verdun, 1916, rain, rot, and the smell of metal everywhere. Soldiers huddled in dugouts, helmets tipped over their faces, hands gripping rifles even in sleep. They said you could tell how long someone had been at war by how quickly they could fall asleep after the shells started falling. 10 seconds meant a veteran. No sleep meant a ghost still wearing skin. There was a kind of ritual to it. Men sleeping in shifts, trusting their lives to the rhythm of someone else's heartbeat. If the breathing beside you stopped, you woke up. Not from sound, but from instinct. That is how fragile life became, a conversation of lungs. Some wrote letters they never sent, convinced that sleep was the only time they could speak freely to the dead. "I saw my brother again last night," one soldier wrote. "He said the noise will never stop, but you get used to it." Science later gave it names: combat fatigue, shell shock, PTSD. But the soldiers did not need acronyms. They called it the ringing. Because even when the world went quiet, their minds did not. Many confessed that when they returned home, silence was worse than war, too big, too empty. They could not sleep in beds anymore. They slept on floors, under tables, with boots on, because part of them refused to believe safety was real. Maybe it was not. In Vietnam, men fell asleep standing, leaning against trees, rifles cradled like children. In the trenches of World War I, soldiers tied themselves to their rifles so they would not slump into the mud and drown while dreaming. And yet, in the middle of all that horror, there was tenderness too. Stories tell of soldiers tucking stray animals into their coats, whispering lullabies in languages no one else could understand. Because even surrounded by death, humans still sang. They still dreamed. Maybe that is what separates us from the machines of war. Not bravery, not violence, but the simple refusal to stop sleeping. Even when the world is ending, the body demands its small resurrection. So if you ever wake from a nightmare, heart racing, be grateful. Somewhere in your blood, an ancestor learned to survive the sound of artillery by pretending it was rain. The 20th century was obsessed with conquering time. If sleep was a cousin of death, then science wanted to make it an obedient one. The dream was simple: suspend life, pause decay, and awaken when the world was better. The problem? No one could agree on how to do it without killing the patient. In the 1920s, Russian doctors conducted what they called lethargic therapy. Patients suffering from trauma or mental illness were injected with mixtures of barbiturates and insulin, forcing them into comas that lasted days, sometimes weeks. They called it resetting the mind. Most woke up calmer, some never woke at all. The newspapers nicknamed it the Sleeping Beauty cure. There was something grotesquely romantic about it. Doctors tucking patients into hospital beds as if performing a modern fairy tale, promising that when they woke, the madness would be gone. Picture a white room, sunlight slanting across rows of still bodies, each breathing shallowly under starched sheets. Nurses moved quietly, like attendants in a mausoleum. Once a day, someone whispered the patient's name, as if reminding the soul to stay close. But science is greedy. In the 1950s, researchers in America and the Soviet Union began freezing small animals, frogs, mice, even dogs, and reviving them hours later. It worked sometimes. The Cold War had given birth to colder dreams, cryonics, suspended animation, immortality by refrigeration. If sleep heals, one scientist wrote, then deep sleep might save the world. The phrase sounded noble. The results were nightmares. There were stories, some true, some whispered, of human trials, terminal patients who volunteered to sleep for the future. None returned, yet hope is stubborn. Even now, companies keep steel pods beneath mountains, filled with liquid nitrogen and human bodies waiting for a dawn that might never come. They call it preservation. I call it faith wearing a lab coat. And here's the irony. We still can't cure insomnia. For all our genius, we can't guarantee a good night's rest. We can only delay death by pretending to control it. Maybe that is what the Sleeping Beauty experiments really were. Science's way of kneeling at the same altar as myth, praying to stop the clock, to bottle peace, to turn the terror of sleep into salvation. But let us be honest. If you could choose to sleep for 100 years and wake when the world was healed, would you? Or would you stay awake, stubborn and mortal, just to feel one more sunrise, one more heartbeat that has not been refrigerated yet? By the 1970s, science had mapped the edges of sleep, but not the middle. Then came the dreamers, the ones who refused to wake. They called themselves the Lucidians, the dream pilgrims, the onironauts. They believed that lucid dreaming, the ability to know you are dreaming while you dream, was not just psychology. It was transcendence. We are the gods of our own unconscious, one founder wrote. When we master the dream, we no longer die. At first, it sounded like harmless New Age nonsense. People practiced sleep journals, reality checks, meditations. But then the dreams began to synchronize. Entire groups claimed to meet each other inside the same dreamscapes, a beach, a spiral tower, a city made of glass. They described the same symbols, the same voices whispering from the same ocean. Coincidence or communion, the media called them cults. The members called it church. In California, they built sleep temples filled with dim blue lights and ambient sound. Dozens of followers would lie side by side connected to EEG machines, guided into trance by soft-voiced leaders. Their goal was permanent awareness, a state where consciousness never truly switched off. The leaders promised immortality of the mind, saying that when their bodies slept, they could continue evolving inside the shared dream. Some participants stopped waking altogether. They called it the long dream. Police found them in quiet houses, hearts still beating, eyes darting beneath closed lids, alive but gone. Doctors could not explain it. No drugs, no trauma, just absence. One neurologist described it as a brain choosing to stay somewhere else. It was not new, of course. The ancient Greeks had their oracles, the Buddhists their dream yogas, the shamans their spirit journeys. The Lucidians were just remixing old obsessions with modern tech. But they tapped into something primal, that secret desire to control the uncontrollable, to make sleep ours, to make death optional. Even today, corners of the internet still whisper about the Dream Network, a supposed remnant of those experiments. People claim to find themselves in identical dreams. A red door, a white corridor, a voice asking, "Do you remember this place?" Maybe it is coincidence. Or maybe some part of us really does overlap in the dark. Lucid dreaming is not fiction anymore. We can track it, trigger it, even teach it. But the cults warned of one rule: never forget which world you are in. Some who tried too hard to stay lucid began losing awareness in the waking world, zoning out mid-conversation, staring at walls as if listening for an unseen narrator. Maybe they were still dreaming. Maybe we all are. After all, how can you be sure you ever woke up? In the 1960s, a handful of scientists decided to measure fear, not by what people said, but by what they dreamed. They called it Project Hypnose. The experiment was simple and cruel. Keep a subject half awake for days, let the mind hover at the edge of sleep and see what crawled out. The volunteers, or victims, were strapped to narrow beds under dim red lights. Electrodes dotted their temples like metal thorns. Every time their brain waves dipped too low, a buzzer shrieked, dragging them back from the abyss. They were told it was to study transitional consciousness. They later called it torture. The first night, subjects laughed. The second, they trembled. By the third, they began seeing things, shadows moving on walls that were not there, faces forming in static. One subject reported hearing his mother humming lullabies. His mother had been dead for years. Another claimed that the room began breathing, expanding and contracting with his heartbeat. But the worst came when they finally slept. On the fifth night, exhaustion overcame every machine. When they woke the next morning, their fear responses were unlike anything recorded. Heart rate spiking, sweat pouring, pupils dilated like prey animals. One whispered, "It was waiting." Asked what he meant, he said, "The thing between the seconds." None of the researchers could explain it, but the EEG recordings showed something no one expected. During their brief moments of sleep, the brain emitted bursts of activity stronger than waking consciousness, as if the mind had been forced into a corner and had to grow teeth. Officially, the project was shut down. Unofficially, fragments of it slipped into military studies, corporate labs, even sleep clinics. They called it by softer names: lucid enhancement, REM suppression therapy, vigilance training. But the principle was the same: control sleep, control fear. It is unsettling how easily the language of comfort can mask cruelty. You tell people you are studying dreams, and they volunteer. You tell them it is about fear, and they still volunteer, because fear feels noble when it has purpose. We do the same thing to ourselves every night. We lie in bed with the lights off, feeding our minds glowing screens, caffeine, worry, keeping ourselves half awake, half alive, testing how close we can get to the edge before something inside us looks back. The bed of fear did not vanish. It just changed shape. It is your mattress, your phone, your mind rehearsing danger before rest. Maybe the scientists were right about one thing. When we dream, we face what hides between seconds. The question is, when it looks back, do we wake? Or do we keep pretending we are still asleep? You know this one. You have probably lived it. You wake in the dark and can't move. Your eyes work, your lungs do not. The room feels heavy, like the air has thickened into water. Then something changes pressure on your chest, the sense of a shape at the edge of vision. You try to scream, but your throat is filled with silence. Modern science calls it sleep paralysis, a misfire between waking and dreaming. Ancient people called it something else: visitation. In every language, every century, there is a name for the thing that sits on you. The old hag in Newfoundland. The pisadera in Brazil, a crone who tramples the chests of gluttons. In Japan, it is kanashibari, the binding. In Iceland, the mara, a phantom that rides sleepers, leaving them breathless. The word nightmare once meant her, not a dream. Imagine being a peasant in the 1500s, waking to that crushing weight, convinced the devil himself is testing your soul. You would hang iron by the bed, whisper prayers, sleep sitting upright to confuse the spirits. Doctors in the 1700s thought it was caused by overeating, or an overfull stomach of night air. They were not entirely wrong. Fear has always lived in the gut, but no explanation really helps when it is happening to you. Even soldiers, scientists, skeptics all report the same thing: the presence. Sometimes it is a woman, sometimes a shadow, sometimes just eyes patient and waiting. It does not speak. It does not have to. You already know what it wants. The terrifying truth is that the paralysis is not total. Tiny muscles still move, and the brain records the panic like a memory of drowning. Those who've lived it say it changes their sleep forever. They start leaving lights on, TVs humming, dogs at the foot of the bed. They say the noise helps. Maybe it does. Maybe the sound of human life confuses whatever hunts the silent. But here's where the science gets unsettling. EEG scans show heightened brain activity during paralysis, more intense than in waking moments of terror. The body is frozen, but the fear is supernatural in scale, real enough to scar the mind. It is as if evolution itself kept a little piece of the monster around, to remind us we are still prey sometimes. Across centuries, the details stay the same: the pressure, the paralysis, the sense of being watched. That consistency frightens researchers. Hallucinations do not synchronize across cultures unless something very old is involved. So maybe the demon is not real. Or maybe it is real enough, a shared dream stitched into our biology. Either way, if it visits you tonight, do not fight. Focus on your breath. Let it pass. Remember this: no one's ever died from it. Though, if the stories are true, a few never quite woke up either. They just learned to keep dreaming with their eyes open. By the early 21st century, sleep stopped being sacred. It became a product. Corporations promised better rest through data, tracking your dreams, your heart rate, your breath, your soul, and selling the results back to you in monthly subscriptions. They called it sleep optimization. The ancient Greeks offered honey to their dream gods. We offer our privacy. Imagine lying in bed, surrounded by devices, smartwatches humming, rings glowing, microphones listening. You drift into slumber believing they are helping you rest, but they are recording every sigh, every toss, every nightmare. Somewhere, servers hum like distant bees, analyzing your sleep patterns to build a more efficient version of you. And then came the next step: dream commerce. Scientists learned to induce lucid dreams using mild electrical stimulation and auditory triggers. At first it was marketed as therapy, face your fears while dreaming, but soon it became entertainment. People paid to experience curated dreamscapes, vacations, romances, heroics, all while their bodies lay still. They called them sleep cinemas. For a price, you could spend the night inside a fantasy built by someone else. One corporation even patented the dream imprint, a snippet of neural data that let advertisers insert imagery into your subconscious. A soda brand once tested it. Consumers woke craving flavors they would never tasted. Governments banned it publicly. Privately, they funded it. Why train soldiers when you can program their courage in REM? There were whisper networks online, places called the dream markets where hackers traded stolen recordings of people's subconscious visions. One file was infamous, the unending corridor. Anyone who played it through neural simulation reported the same scene, a hallway of doors, each one marked with their own name. Most woke screaming. The company denied involvement. But a week later, its CEO resigned, claiming he had not slept in months. It is easy to laugh at the paranoia, until you remember how many of your own dreams now belong to algorithms. The sensors on your pillow, the app that asks how you feel each morning, they are not listening to heal you. They are learning how you dream. Maybe that is why our dreams feel less strange lately. Too clean, too edited, like something optimized for replay value. Perhaps the machines are not just watching us sleep. Perhaps they are already dreaming through us. So next time you wake from a dream that feels suspiciously well written, check the time, check the phone by your bed and ask yourself, was it your dream or someone's content beta test? There are cities that never sleep, not because they can't, but because they have forgotten how. Neon replaces moonlight, engines replace crickets, and insomnia becomes a form of citizenship. Walk through New York at 3 a.m. Tokyo at 4 or Las Vegas at any hour and you will see it. Faces lit blue by screens, shops still open, taxis prowling like restless dreams. The night is not quiet anymore. It hums. We traded darkness for convenience, and in doing so, we broke something ancient inside us. Once, the body rose with the sun and slept with the stars. Now it runs on caffeine, adrenaline, and 24-hour delivery. The circadian rhythm became a corporate casualty. The Romans feared sleeping too deeply. We fear not being productive enough. Imagine an apartment high above the city, one light still on, one person scrolling through feeds that never end. Down below, someone else does the same, and another, until the whole skyline looks like a constellation of loneliness. This is the new collective ritual. Millions of people awake together, isolated but synchronized. The church once called midnight the devil's hour. Silicon Valley renamed it engagement peak. Scientists warn that constant light confuses the brain, that insomnia erodes empathy, memory, even morality. But try telling that to a world that worships efficiency. We do not dream, we recharge. We do not rest, we update. Yet the body remembers what the mind denies. Heart disease, anxiety, burnout, modern plagues for a sleepless species. And still we scroll. Maybe it is not addiction. Maybe it is fear. When the city finally goes quiet, you hear yourself again. That is what we are really avoiding. Some cities tried to fight back. Paris experimented with blackout nights, turning off monuments and billboards once a week. People reported sleeping deeper, dreaming brighter. Others panicked, calling the darkness oppressive. It is ironic, our ancestors begged the sun to return. We beg the night to leave us alone. We have built worlds where rest feels rebellious. There is a quote from an insomniac poet of the 1930s, "To sleep is to betray the city." Maybe that is still true. Every blinking light outside your window, every hum of air conditioner or elevator, is the heartbeat of civilization refusing to stop. But everything that refuses to stop eventually collapses. So when the lights flicker someday, from blackout or grace, look up. You might see stars you would forgotten existed, and in that moment you will understand why the ancients prayed to the night instead of fearing it, because without the dark, even dreams burn out. Every culture tries to explain what happens after the last breath, but most of them start with the same assumption: death feels like sleep. The difference is duration. From the tombs of Egypt to the catacombs of Rome, From Viking ships to modern cemeteries, the dead have always been tucked in like children, their arms folded, their eyes closed, their beds carved from stone or soil. Even the language betrays us rest in peace, as if peace were something you could just fall into. In the Middle Ages, priests told mourners that their loved ones were merely asleep in God's hand, waiting for the final awakening. Families whispered lullabies at funerals, believing the soul could still hear them. Death was not the end. It was an intermission. But what if that comfort came from something deeper, something biological? Some scientists argue that near-death experiences the tunnels of light. The visions of loved ones are just dreams triggered by a dying brain, the ultimate hallucination of safety. In other words, the moment we die, our minds give us one last bedtime story to soften the fall. If that is true, maybe eternity is not a place at all. Maybe it is a dream that never ends. Philosophers have wrestled with that idea for centuries. Is an endless dream heaven or hell? In one ancient Chinese tale, a man dreams he is a butterfly. When he wakes, he wonders if he is a man who dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming he is a man. Perhaps death is that uncertainty, frozen forever, a consciousness trapped between two worlds, endlessly shifting but never aware of the change. And yet, across time, people kept trying to make peace with it. The Victorians took photographs of their dead, as if they were sleeping, propped gently in chairs beside the living. In Tibet, monks meditated beside corpses to confront the illusion of self. Even today, morticians speak in lullabies. She looks peaceful, he is at rest, they are sleeping now. We can't help it. We are wired to imagine death as a softer version of something we already know. Maybe that is mercy. Maybe that is denial. Or maybe just maybe sleep and death are the same ocean, and life is the brief moment we come up for air. There is comfort in that thought, that every night we practice dying, and every morning we are resurrected, even if we do not deserve to be. So tonight when you close your eyes, do not fight the darkness. Let it take you gently. Somewhere beyond your last thought, the oldest part of you already knows the way. So here you are, at the edge of waking, at the threshold that billions have crossed before you and never returned from. Every night you die a little, and every morning you rise again, pretending you do not remember the journey. But somewhere deep inside, you do. The echo of that ancient fear, the first sleep, the dark cave, the candle's last flicker, still hums through your blood. Tonight, when you close your eyes, you will join a procession older than history, the pharaoh rehearsing eternity, the monk praying not to dream, the soldier curled beneath thunder, the noble smiling in her coffin, the sadhu lying still on nails. They all passed this way. They all trusted the dark enough to surrender to it. You think sleep is simple, that you are safe inside your room, your body tucked beneath blankets surrounded by soft light and the hum of machines. But sleep is the one act that still belongs to mystery. The moment you drift, your body obeys gravity while your mind escapes it. You become both the dreamer and the dream. Some nights the doors open quietly. You float through fragments of memory and meaning, through symbols that make sense only while they last. Other nights the doors open wide and something looks back. You wake with your heart racing, unsure if you were being chased or called. Scientists will tell you it is all electrical impulses. The poets will tell you it is your soul rehearsing infinity. I think it is both. Maybe the brain invented gods because it needed someone to talk to while dreaming. Maybe the gods invented brains for the same reason. Either way, every night is a reunion with the version of you that is not bound by time, or body, or name. So as you lie there tonight, breathing slower, lighter, closer to stillness, remember this: the dark is not an enemy. It is an ancient friend that never stopped waiting for you. All you have to do is fall. And when you wake, if you wake, do not rush it. Linger in the quiet. Listen for what might have followed you back. Because the only real difference between the living and the dreaming is that one of them thinks the other is not real. Thank you for staying awake with me through this long night of history, myth, and shadow. Now tell me, when you dream tonight, which century do you think will find you, or would you rather I find you first? Next time, somewhere between heartbeats, leave me your answer in the comments. And until then, sleep gently.